Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Man, I'm excited about today's show. Ed Piskor is back. Ed, who, of course, is the creator of the incredible hip-hop family tree. Listen, I'm not a hip-hop fan, but I got to tell you, his retelling of the history of hip-hop in comic book form has been so fascinating to see. He's got 4 volumes out. I'm a volume behind. But he's bringing his design and narrative talents to Marvel in a very, very exciting miniseries called X-Men Grand Design. He's retelling the history of the mutants in the Marvel Universe, going back to the very beginning and X-Men #1. We're going back to, the early golden age here with a lot of what he's doing. And it's incredible. I read the first 40 pages, the first issue, which comes out on December 22nd, and it's incredibly ambitious. It's very interesting. It's one of Axel Alonso's last greenlit projects, so certainly the timing is interesting as well. It reminds me, and Ed and I talk about it, when movie studios will change hands, and something is already in the works, and the new regime has to bring a film to term, put it in pregnancy terms, but it's true. And it's always really interesting. I don't know if you remember, Christopher Guest did that great movie, and now I'm blanking, isn't it The Big Picture, with Kevin Bacon? And a little different than the Guffman movies and his movies with his repertory class, but it's a great comedy. You got to seek it out. And it got no support from the studio because it was a new regime. So it's like, all right, put it out, the hell with it, whatever, and you move on. Well, this is a little different. And X-Men Grand Design, again, as I know you all know, I'm not the biggest X-Men fan, but I do like when something ambitious happens, whether it's the X-Men or any Marvel character. This is what it feels like. You'll remember a few years ago, Marvel did Strange Tales, and I thought that was really cool and ambitious. But Ed is right. You'll hear it in the conversation, it was kind of more of a stunt. It was only 5 issues. Dean Haspiel, a great indie creator, has been able to come in and do some miniseries over the years. But it's been a pretty long time since we've seen somebody like that. So it's pretty cool that Axel greenlit this, and we get somebody as unique as Ed doing his spin on the Marvel Universe. I definitely think if you like Strange Tales, you're going to be even more excited about this arc of 6 issues. Ed'll tell you about the whole series, how it's going to come out, how it's going to be traded, and I don't want to tip any more. You'll enjoy the conversation today with Ed Piskor. It's great to have another interesting independent voice back at one of the big 2 and doing more than just 5 or 10 pages of story. So we're going to talk about X-Men Grand Design with Ed Piskor on today's Word Balloon. Today's episode is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you, League, for your support. A couple new members have joined this week. I thank you. Good timing. It's the end of the month. And if you think Word Balloon helps enhance your appreciation of the geek culture, and you think that, you want to support the show, if you could subscribe to Word Balloon, that's fantastic. It's funny, I put out a Twitter and Facebook post Monday, because literally Monday to the day, it's been exactly 1 year since I got let go from my full-time radio job. And this has really been a very interesting year of freelance opportunities with things like No Plan B, Mike Avon Oming's art book, and trying to expand with Word Balloon. And we've moved over to Blog Talk Radio now. Thank you very much for being patient, and I hope the commercials don't get in the way of the appreciation of the show. But I'm going to be crunching some numbers in the next couple days, and it really helps the subscribers to Word Balloon help keep this show possible. As I am looking for full-time work, and we'll see what happens in the next few weeks or months. I might get an answer regarding that, and I'll let you know how things turn out. But it's been a journey, and I forgive me if that sounds too maudlin, because it isn't bad stuff. Good stuff has happened, and it's giving me a chance to create more content in Word Balloon, under the Word Balloon umbrella, and really make something of this. And I really do see the progression. So a lot of it is due to your help through those subscriptions. If you like Word Balloon and you want to subscribe, you can go to patreon.com/wordballoon or go to wordballoon.com, and there's an ad for Patreon right there on the front page. But thank you for your support and consideration, League of Word Balloon listeners. Word Balloon is also brought to you by InStock Trades at InStockTrades.com. I'm releasing this the night of New Comics Day. I didn't have a chance to go to the store. I was at Second City, the theater there, doing a presentation about, surviving during the gig economy to a bunch of entrepreneurs, and it was really fun to have that opportunity. So I haven't seen these books yet at InStock Trades. Maybe you have. There's some pretty neat stuff, though. You can get the latest trade of Flash by Jeff Johns. What a amazing run. Incredible run from Jeff Johns back in the 2000s doing Flash and really honing his craft. This collects Flash 200 number 1 through 213, 320 pages. And Jay, Wally, and Barry all represented on the cover. So you're in for some great stuff. It's 50% off, $14.99. You can get Jessica Jones, Volume 2, The Secrets of Maria Hill. That was a hell of a story arc. Michael Gaydos, Brian Bendis, David Mack cover. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Jessica Jones in the hands of some other Marvel creators. It's been a great run. And we already, I think, have had a taste on Netflix, so it's possible. It'll happen. But it was great that the people that made this book possible in the first place, Alias, going that far back to the beginning of the Quesada regime, 2 regimes ago at Marvel. But this is a great collection of Jessica Jones with Mike Gaydos, Brian Bendis. It represents Jessica Jones 7 through 12, 136 pages. And it's on sale at InStockTrades.com for just $8.99. Of course, we're in the Christmas season, and, for the comic book lover in your life, you can do no better than InStockTrades.com. Great books, great prices, and it's very easy to fill up a Christmas list with some of the great deals that you will find there. How about Ghost Fleet, the whole goddamn thing? It's the trade paperback, Donny Cates, Daniel Warren Johnson. This collects the Ghost Fleet 1 through 8 from Image. 45% off. It's just $10.99. There's tons of while supplies last, reduced price savings going on. You can get things like 75% off 12-issue discount comic book service variants. Bundles, only $15.47. You can get, let's see what else. 70% on select Marvel omnibuses. So that would be great. Man, there's a good stocking stuffer. Man, that'll stretch things out. 50 to 90% off a bunch of mostly out-of-print titles. DC Select Books up to 70% off. Select Marvel Masterworks up to 50% off. PSA Art Books up to 50% off. Image Books up to 60% off. Damaged books that, I got to be honest, I'm okay with a crease in my book. That sounds like a euphemism. That sounded dirty. My apologies. But you know what I'm saying? It's true. I want to read the book. It's okay. So you get great deals at InStock Trades on damaged books as well. Maybe not a Christmas gift, but something for yourself. But anyway, this is the holiday season. Be smart. You'll find great books at great prices at InStockTrades.com. All right, without further ado, let's have our conversation with Ed Piskor talking about X-Men, Grand Design, and a bit about Hip Hop Family Tree, and just some general philosophies that, honestly, I don't know if these have been discussions in your comic book stores, but I think you got something new to talk about when you hear some of Ed's thoughts. Ed Piskor, now on Word Balloon. I'm happy to have Ed Piskor back to Word Balloon. Welcome back, man. It's great to talk to you again.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for taking the time to promote this comic for me.
This is great. I mean, I'm a fan of Hip Hop Family Tree, and in the same vein, it's cool that you're doing this project with Marvel. Let's start at the beginning. How did this happen?
Well, the Hip Hop Family Tree comics attained a certain level of popularity, got an Eisner Award, got nominated for like 8 or 9 Eisner Awards on this thing, hit the New York Times bestseller list.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So I started to feel slightly egotistical, and I put a tweet online after I drew some X-Men fan art and simply just said, Marvel should let me make whatever kind of X-Men comic I feel like making. Within an hour, Axel got in touch, and the ball started rolling. I believe from the time that I put that tweet out to the time that I put pencil to paper on issue 1 was maybe 5 months or so, which was perfect because I still needed to finish the 4th Hip Hop Family Tree book. So finished that up. I took about a month and then started drawing the first issue of Grand Design that's going to come out at the end of December.
That's excellent, man. No, I got a preview issue of issue 1, 40 fantastic pages, and I'm really glad. I hope that fans of hip hop will check this out. I imagine they will, and I always am excited when more distinct creators like yourself get a chance at playing in either DC or Marvel's universes. And, we've had things in the past like Bizarro Comics at DC, and wasn't it Strange Tales at Marvel a couple years ago that had a lot of more indie creators. And forgive the distinction, but you know what I mean. And, we're basically doing it for the audience to kind of say it. But I love it, man. I mean, obviously you're a longtime X-Men fan because this is a great first 40 pages. That I guess you're telling the history of the X-Men. How long will the series of Grand Design last?
There are going to be 6 issues total.
Okay,
and they're going to come out in kind of 2-issue arcs. So the first arc comes out December, January. Then there will be a trade paperback that comes out in April. And I'm not quite sure what the schedule is for the second arc. That's something I'm going to talk to Marvel about because, I am the only person doing the creative work on this, so I am the bottleneck. And I absolutely will not rush my work. This is an extremely intensive project, given all the research required to put it together. And I'm not going to take any shortcuts to just churn out pages. So I have the 3rd issue finished, and I'm about a quarter of the way done with the 4th issue. Once I hit the halfway point, I'm going to have that conversation with Marvel about like, okay, what if we put out this second arc, in the summer of 2018 or something like that.
Okay.
But there will be 6 issues total.
That's cool. So yeah, the first issue is 40 pages. Are they all going to be like 40-page single issues?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah. Like I convinced them to give me an extra page in issue 3 because I had to. The entire project is about trying to right past wrongs and get everything to work together in like a really cogent, streamlined, cohesive way.
Okay.
And there's this one thing that always bothered me in those early Claremont X-Men comics, where it was like the transition from Dave Cockrum as artist to John Byrne, and the X-Men are on this weird like moon with the Emkron crystal, and the crystal makes the universe blink out of existence. But the creative team only had 17 pages to play with. So when the entirety of universal existence blinks out of time or whatever,
okay,
it's relegated to this like super tiny little panel, and it happens in both issues. Like the first John Byrne issue, it happens, and when they do a recap, and it happens in the Dave Cockrum. So like I told them, like, you got to give me like a whole page at least just to have the universe blink out, because it's like an important moment. You know what I mean? But that's like a mere example of what I'm trying to do with this project, to just try to give all of the most important moments their time to shine, and to focus on the bigger picture rather than the small personal dramatic moments of character interplay that Chris Claremont's so famous for. I personally am just more interested in sharing with people the broader ideas, the broader concepts. I'm very excited about bringing new readers into the fold because X-Men is known for its kind of convoluted, sprawling history. And, everybody who knows me knows that I'm a fan of X-Men comics. Very often, a girlfriend or somebody will try to relate or out of curiosity, they'll ask me like, what is the X-Men comic I should read? Sure. What's so great about it? And I just never had a good answer.
Absolutely, man.
I just never had a good answer. So I'm going to make it. I'm going to read this. And if this is interesting, then you could jump on board to the bigger thing.
That's excellent, man. No, and truly, Word Balloon listeners might know, going back years, I've always said there were two doors when I was a kid. There was a Legion of Superheroes door, and there was an X-Men door. And I went through the Legion of Superheroes door, not disliking the X-Men, but like you say, and especially by the time Claremont was really up and running, sometimes it really did feel impenetrable in terms of where to jump in. I mean, I read things like God Loves, Man Kills, and I've come in over the years, especially since doing the podcast, when some of my favorite writers have gone into the X-Men world, and I've checked out a few arcs here and there, and I've followed Wolverine on his own. But you're right. This is a really interesting opportunity, and especially coming through your point of view, which is so distinct. So when beyond the comics themselves, because clearly you are doing your due diligence in terms of checking out the history and representing it, I think in really, really fun ways, especially in this first issue, and really those early years. When you get to the periods of people like Claremont and his work and stuff, because I compare it to what you did with Hip Hop Family Tree, are you going to talk to Claremont at all while you're making this, or have you?
Yeah, I have actually. I went to New York Comic Con back in October.
Okay,
and the con lasts from Thursday to Sunday or something like this.
Yeah,
I landed pretty early on Wednesday. Spent the day with Chris at his place. And we talked for hours and hours, and it was a good conversation. I brought up the fact that there are certain things that I'm going to have to kind of massage or finesse to get to work in a way that appeals to my taste.
Sure.
And he was like, Ed, there is no finessing. Some of this stuff is a cluster F word.
I swear.
That was really great to hear straight from him too, because things were dropped on his head as he was writing these comics, and he had a certain destination of where he wanted to take everything, but then these curveballs came at him that he was required to include, or these directions were mandated that he go down, and it makes for a very clunky set of stories here and there. So I want to try to fix some of that, or at least build up to these moments in a more elegant way so that there's some true payoff rather than just, an example I could give in the regular series is that Scott Summers' Cyclops establishes this relationship with a woman named Madeline Pryor, who looks like a spitting image of his past love, Jean Grey. Mm-hmm. He marries this lady. He has a kid with Madeline. And then all of a sudden, Jean Grey comes back to life, and he just cold disses his wife and kid. How heroic is that? And it gets no real play. It just is a matter of fact rather than a dramatic moment in the story. It's really terrible. So I'm going to try to get that to make a little bit more sense and have some structure rather than just like this abrupt thing just because Jim Shooter wanted to create X Factor.
Now,
which is exactly what it was.
okay. And beyond Chris, are there other ex-creators or people like Shooter that you might talk to as well to get it? Because that's the thing. I love the fact that you did that with Hip Hop Family Tree. And of course, we're dealing with real people and real events and things like that. So how much of the editorial side and choices and the opportunity to talk to those people who made those choices are playing into Grand Design?
In terms of the plot structure and stuff like that, Chris is the guy.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned, X-Men ends with his run. Certainly for me.
Okay.
But artistically, I'm allowing myself to indulge in all of the artistic influences that have inspired me from X-Men and beyond. So, for instance, like in this first issue that you see that you checked out, there's a panel where Angel is like either hiding his wings or he's getting undressed from being saddled down and hiding his angel wings.
Yeah.
The art basically I sampled directly from Jack Kirby in issue 1 of X-Men.
Sure.
And there are several examples of that throughout all the issues where, I don't profess to have the answer to all creative problems. And, if Neil Adams draws an amazing composition of the Sentinels flying into the sun, I'm going to kind of reference that rather than try to reinvent the wheel.
Sure.
So that's a thing where Hip Hop Family Tree kind of inspired the ability to sample. It kind of made it okay for me to kind of, because I'm such a big fan of rap music and these guys took James Brown and George Clinton and took little snippets from old music that hasn't been dusted off in a long time, and then they'd make something new.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what I'm doing with this comic on the artistic sense. So Chris Claremont's my guy when it comes to the structure of the plot and story, but the art references all the great X-Men artists and beyond. So even people like Katsuhiro Otomo, who did Akira.
Okay.
There's a little bit of Hergé Tintin in there. A lot of stuff. Windsor McKay.
Attaboy, very nice.
Yeah, you'll see that in issue 2.
Oh, very good. Oh, interesting. I look for. Well, again, that's the thing, man. Your influences come through. Your presentation is always exciting and unique, and down to I love how you always, and you did this with Hip Hop Family Tree as well. The look of the paper has that aged look, and where it almost gets peach colored in terms of what the galleys and the gutters look like around the panels. And I used to have old Spirit comics from the 70s, and I wasn't sure if the paper itself was peach colored that it was printed on, or it just aged that way. And I got to meet Will Eisner before I was even doing Word Balloon back in 2002 and had him sign a couple. And I even asked him and said, yeah, I go, why did they use peach-colored paper? He's like, no, that's how it aged and stuff. Your presentation and the way that you make comics really does make it look like we're looking at some sort of historical document of the subjects that you're covering.
I have more comics that look like what you described than the glossy, computer-colored stuff of today. Mm-hmm. I think if we were to take a survey of the average American and ask them what they think comics is, it's closer to what I do than what, frankly, Marvel or DC puts out today. People, and I think that might have a lot to do with certainly the ubiquity of comics back in the day compared to now. But the pop art movement might have had a lot to do with that too. You always see hipster girls on Halloween dressed like they have like a Lichtenstein costume. Sure,
that's awesome, man.
Yeah. So it's important for me to to kind of capture that spirit. I just like that aesthetic. And, you know, if they were more prepared, and I'm talking about printers back in the day, if they had some foresight, they would have just put a couple bales of newsprint to the side to let them age and turn that oxidized peach color, because that's it almost acts in the same way as an underpainting does when you're using oils, where you have like a monochromatic yellow to brown structure underneath that makes all the colors you apply on top work together. Because that's ultimately what happens when you know, like say the Kirby X-Men was printed initially. They had those poppy, bright colors that were all kind of competing with one another. It almost looked like a candy bowl of color. But then, you know, you just have to wait 40 years, take a look at that stuff, and the colors are sublime, and they all work together in a really, really beautiful way because of that yellow kind of undertone. And, you know, that's the approach that I try to capture with the aesthetic of my stuff. And we had to cut off the final order date for the shops a little bit earlier than normal, because I insisted that Marvel print my stuff on the closest approximation to old newsprint that they can find and have a glossy cover and all that, which is just simply not done by Marvel or DC anymore. They have these glossy, slick comics that have the same cover stock as the interior pages, and I just don't want that. So unless Marvel is lying to me, this comic should look and feel like a comic that you remember, rather than just run-of-the-mill stuff that they put out nowadays.
That's fantastic, man, because you're right. I think, ironically, the attempt to upgrade the pages and make a slicker page, and I'm sure you remember, well, you may not because you're slightly younger than me, but I remember when Baxter paper was all the rage, and we were seeing,
for sure,
all that stuff in the 80s print that way. And I agree. Gotham Central, I think, is one of the last comics that, as it was coming out in the early 2000s, was still being printed on newsrag and that kind of old-fashioned paper. And it works for certain types of art. And again, you're certainly trying to capture that kind of Silver Age and also independent look and everything. And I really do think that's missing from a lot of today's comics. And it will be interesting to see what the final product looks like and feels like, because it does. Clearly you're using, I'm assuming, a color palette, this is a layman talking, that is a bit more muted and not as lush in terms of the attempt to do art on this slick paper versus the old news rag that comics used for decades. Am I right?
Yeah, for sure. Like a modern Marvel or DC comic, if they were to print on this extremely absorbent paper with the kind of lens flares and computer chicanery that they apply to their color, and certainly a lot of dark inks, it would just look like a mess on like a newsprint. So those comics are built for glossy paper. My comics are built for a more matted kind of paper. And hopefully, I'm quite sure Marvel will go along with the play. Like, that's what they said. But I just, show me the money, man. Like, when I see it, I'll believe it. But the other thing too, like, I just turned in the files for the trade paperback, and it's going to be the same format as Hip Hop Family Tree, which is about twice the size of your average comic.
Fantastic.
In terms of just scale.
Sure.
And it's pretty close to the Marvel Treasury size of the late 70s, early 80s.
Oh, yeah.
So that's another past wrong that I'm righting, because there was never an X-Men Treasury edition. So at the end of this project, there will be 3 of them, and I'm reprinting a classic story in each one. So this first trade is going to have X-Men 1 by Stan and Jack, and I'm recoloring that too because I just don't like I don't like how any of the Kirby reprints look for any company basically when they just drop these really bright weird colors and when they use computer coloring on Kirby, it takes all the Kirby out of Kirby. So for my money, it's going to be like the best Jack Kirby color reprint in existence. And I will die on that hill defending that statement.
That's outstanding. Hey, that's great, man. Who was the original colors? Do you know? Was it Marie Severin? Was it Stan Goldberg? I know they were Marvel colorists back in those early Silver Age days.
Yeah, as you know, the colorist was uncredited on the pages, but at that time, if I had to place a bet, I would say Stan Goldberg.
Okay.
Because Marie, I believe, comes in a little bit after that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
You know,
yeah.
I could be wrong though, but I'm quite sure that it's Goldberg.
That's one of my massive regrets. I got to meet Stan a couple times, Goldberg, and meant to have him on, and unfortunately he passed away before I had that opportunity. I believe that's correct. I believe he has passed away. I know he had a big car accident a few years ago, and I know that kind of messed him up for a while. Yeah, right near the end. So for so long, I only knew him from Archie comics. Sure.
And then people were like, "Nah, man." I forget where I discovered. You know, you find all this like little trivial information in drips and drabs your whole life, and then
man.
you never know where you discovered it. But when I found out that he had this illustrious past at Marvel, and you know, basically created all the colors of all the iconic superheroes that Kirby and Steve Ditko visually created. You know, the man has stripes. He should go down as a legend in comics history.
No question, and you're right. And also, yeah, like specifically beyond Archie, his contributions to the look of Marvel Comics. And I know what you mean about the modern recoloring sometimes. I appreciate it as an experiment, but at the end of the day, it does almost feel like when Ted Turner was colorizing classic black and white in
it's exactly that.
Yeah. It's
exactly that.
Interesting experiment, but yeah, it takes away from, you know, the tools that they had. And in fact, an early conversation I had with Neil Adams, he told me about how he talked to Saul Harrison and kind of doubled the color palette from like 24 to 48 or whatever the number was, because it was just, well, that's how we've always done it. And Neil kind of came in the 60s and 70s and said, no, you know, if you tweak it a little bit, you know, you can really expand the palette. And it was more of a natural progression rather than imposing, I think, the modern color schemes on some of the classic stuff. So that's great. And also, funny that you mention the lack of Treasury-sized, X-Men books, because, yeah, with the exception maybe of the Teen Titans crossover, that's really probably I hadn't realized, because I used to buy all of that stuff when it was coming out, both DC and Marvel. And I totally forgot that, there were no, other than the Titans crossover, there were no X-Men Treasury editions. So that's interesting too. I was wondering, given that you're going to be putting these out as far as trades, 2 issues at a time. So, you know, as far as original story, maybe 80 pages. Are we going to get process pages as well? And as you say, we're going to get X-Men 1 in the first issue, or in the first arc when it's trade published and everything. Are there any other bonus things that are going to come out either in the comic itself or in the Treasury edition?
Definitely. I'm a control freak, so I'm handling the design of the trade, and a good book kind of works like a music album, or even, you know, the beginning part of the book, to me, it's like an overture before a Broadway musical or something. So there's all this stuff to consider. Not only is it going to have, you know, the best Kirby color reprint in existence for my money, but it might be one of the best designed Marvel books since the Omega the Unknown that John Latham and
Sure.
Farrell Dalrymple and Paul Hornschmeyer put together, because that was a beautifully designed book.
Yes.
But I am including a lot of extra stuff, and in that first trade, there's this feature about. Well, I don't want to spoil it, but it basically is evidence that this comic for me is 35 years in the making. So there's a 5-page feature that I have in there that is really, like, when I show this thing off, people are really kind of blown away by the material. It's definitely the best bonus stuff that's been in a Marvel comic for a long time.
Interesting. Okay. Is that your own kind of personal journey with the X-Men, this 5-page thing?
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of art from my whole life, kind of building up to this moment. It kind of tells the story behind the story, and then it's going to jump into the Kirby X-Men with my coloring on top. Like, yeah, I think it's going to be about a 120-page book that it's extremely sexy, man. I think with the book in mind, the issues are for the people who, through inertia, go to the comic shop on Wednesdays.
You bet.
And there are market considerations that I have to abide by with that. So there will be some ads here and there, and we have to follow the standard format because, fans get hemorrhoids if they can't bag and board their comics. But the book is something different. The book, even the cover, I chose a very kind of simple design that communicates the idea of what the X-Men is in a very quick notion. Like, you will look at this book and you will understand the concept of X-Men with this single image, because I've always been interested in creating readers rather than just being another person who's indulging the existing pool of readership. Like, I really want cartoonists to have consideration for people on the outside more than they generally do. And it's been a big benefit to me to do that. I brought hip hop people into the comic book game after they left when they were kids, or
Sure.
maybe they've never given comics a shot. I did that before with Computer Hacker Comic. So this is going to introduce people to X-Men for the first time, and it's going to be an elegant experience if I have my way. Once again, going to mimic the paper stock of Hip Hop Family Tree for the big trade, which is pretty close to the paper that was used on those old Treasury editions. So hopefully it'll all come together in a really nice way.
That's excellent, man, and really looking forward to it, and glad that it can sit next to Hip Hop Family Tree on a shelf for people who've been following your own personal journey in comics, and all that stuff will kind of look nice on a bookshelf together, but also making the concessions for the Wednesday Warriors with the monthly comics. I'm interested, and I'm glad that you mentioned that Axel is the guy that greenlit this project, and obviously we're at a point now, just a week or so ago, where Axel left Marvel, and it reminds me sometimes of when a movie is in the middle of production and a studio changes hands. Have you had a chance to talk to CB Cebulski or any other of the powers that be since Axel has left Marvel, and how has that impacted the production of this project?
Like you said, it's such a new development that CB was living in Shanghai.
Sure.
And he has to come move back to New York. So I want to give the guy a little bit of time to get over jet lag and and probably an insane email inbox full of sycophants, and freelancers trying to keep their jobs and like all that kind of thing.
Sure.
hopefully everything stays cool. Like I look forward to working with CB. I'd like to talk to him because I could see, well, I like to shoot for the stars, and I'm doing everything I can to make like a really beautiful book for Marvel. And what if this reigns in the new era of, beautifully designed collections?
Sure.
What if I can convince CB that would be an interesting way to go? What if this effort becomes the first kind of indie comics effort that's like taken seriously, where like you mentioned Bizarro Comics and Strange Tales. You could ask probably any of the cartoonists who participated in any of those. They were just doing little jerk off things, like
I know what you mean.
It's just like here's a little 5-pager,
Sure.
and I'm gonna have Iron Man fighting a giant hot dog, like whatever.
Yeah, man.
But what if this thing is a hit and it inspires Marvel to bring more kind of auteur creators into the fold to let them do their thing? I think that those are two of the big possibilities we could have. And when I talk to CB, I'm going to mention those things. Like, listen, man, let's not do just piecemeal, slap together collections. Like, we can make. You have this amazing library of stuff. Let's present it in an extremely beautiful way, and it could be a new requirement in terms of market competition for the big two. And what if in the way that Karen Berger was able to grab all of these interesting British voices in the 80s and brought them and created a kind of new wave? What if, because at this moment right now, with me talking to you, Marvel has created a goodwill ambassador to the indie comics universe, man, because I could talk to anybody and say, listen, I'm having fun and they're letting me do my thing. They're not sweating me.
Yep.
Because that's always been what made cartoonists of my universe nervous about ever working for them. And I was nervous too. I didn't cash my checks for 6 months because I was nervous that at the end they would make me change things, or, they would bring in some intern to re-letter my comic or something like that. And that's just not been the case. They've been totally into everything I've been doing. So if it's a hit, the market decides, and, they're going to want to replicate that kind of success or whatever.
Sure.
So it's an interesting new era, and I look forward to it. Hopefully it all works out.
Well, I think
if not, then I'll just do Hip Hop Family Tree 5 and keep all the money. Keep all the money. I won't share with them.
I think the good
But I'd like to finish what I started.
I hear you, man. No, and honestly, I appreciate where you're coming from, and I honestly do believe that both in the case of Axel Alonso and CB Cebulski, I think they're like-minded that way. I mean, CB really has that kind of track record when he was running other companies. And certainly even in his capacity at Marvel, it has been, going around and trying to find new art styles for the company and stuff. And I do think that, as you say, there is kind of a house kind of style to both DC and Marvel. Guys like Trad Moore were able to come in and do their thing at Marvel and keep their style. Beyond, like you said, about Vertigo, in the early 2000s when Greg Rucka and Sean Martinborough were doing Detective, it was the freshest looking Batman I had ever seen. And it's literally when I came back to comics. And I've said this to Rucka, and I've told this in messaging to Martinborough. I'm like, it was you guys were part of the reason why I came back to comics. Oming and Bendis doing Powers and doing a crime comic in that sort of cartoony way. So, yeah, we've had little bursts of that here and there. But again, mostly it's been, with the exceptions of things like Martinborough and Rucka doing Detective and stuff, Sometimes it is just, create your own comics and the image movement that have allowed for things like that. And no, you're right. I think a shakeup is in order. It's going to be very interesting. Have you heard from the Wednesday Warrior X-Men fan community what their take on this is? Has it been positive? Has it been negative?
I have not looked at all, and I've battened down my social media hatches so that they can't even get to me. I have to feel confident in what I'm doing to make this work.
Sure.
I can't be second guessing myself, and the stereotypical Wednesday Warrior really needs some vitamin D and
sunlight.
and a little sunlight. They need to get rid of that nervous energy, the energy that compels them to get online and diss people and all that kind of thing. So I'm just preparing for that because I go to the comic shop, and I hear the conversations, and I'm not a part of that. And I am a creative person, and a creative person's job is to give you what you don't even know you need, basically.
Sure.
Fans have a certain idea of what they want, but if they really knew what they wanted, they would just make it. That's our job. So I haven't heard from them.
Okay.
I hope it receives support, of course, but I'm really going for new readers for this. Mm-hmm. That's really important to me. And hopefully people get excited about the X-Men. What you said earlier about the two camps, the Legion of Superheroes camp and the X-Men camp.
Yeah.
I was born in 82, so we'll say that I really started collecting comics in, say, 80, 87 or so.
Okay.
Where, I was able to read when I was 5 or whatever.
Sure.
And Legion of Superheroes, and this is no diss, man, please don't take it as such.
Not at all. Go on, please.
but the Legion of Superheroes was considered real corny to my peer group.
Sure.
Looking back, we're just like, what is this? Is Bouncing Boy like all this kind of thing? I fear that that is what my X-Men is to like a current crop. Because I did for Axel when they were doing the hip hop covers, I did an X-Men hip hop cover.
Okay, how was that received?
And I had it was apparently super well received, but it was the least fun I've ever had in comics.
Interesting.
Because I had no connection to any of these characters. I didn't know that there was a girl Wolverine. I didn't know like Angel had these weird wings that I didn't even understand. They have flames. It was not a fun gig.
I understand.
And as I was drawing it, I literally felt like, and I expressed this to my friends, I'm like, this might as well be like Legion of Superheroes I'm drawing, because it's like, I just have no connection. And then it got me thinking like, oh no, what if like, the Jim Lee X-Men is Legion of Superheroes to like the new crop, and they just consider this stuff corny. So it's like I have to do a showcase of like everything that is really cool about the X-Men.
Yeah, man.
And that's sort of what the project is in a way.
Sure.
A thesis statement on the coolness of X-Men.
Well, and honestly, I'm glad you said that, because truly that has been one of the things that has kept me from today's X-Men. And Ed Brubaker and Matt Fraction, I love those guys. I love what they do. I love their writing. I think they're fun to have on Word Balloon when they come on as well. And I remember at the beginning of their X-Men arc, and they're like, we're really going to focus on Pixie. I'm like, who the fuck is Pixie? They're like, oh, yeah,
I don't even know what that is.
Well, there you go, man. Exactly. And I'm like, and that's the thing. Much like the Legion having its hundreds of members over the years, and especially after a certain point, you're like, oh, my God. And again, when I got into, not to defend myself, but I guess I will for a little bit, I was a 5-year-old kid, and that kind of simple Silver Age, because they were still reprinting a lot of the 50s and 60s stuff, that Kurt Swan style, which I really adore, and it's so just great for kids, and from a storybook way, and not to condescend in terms of Kurt Swan's greatness, because I do really think he's a master when it comes to showing emotion on characters' faces. But that was my introduction to the Legion, and I really did grow up with the Cochran and Mike Grell versions, and as their art got more sophisticated, and you're right, there are goofy characters like Bouncing Boy and Matter Eater Lad, and God, the Legion of Substitute Heroes speaks for themselves. But the same thing kind of happened, like you said, where in my mind, Jim Lee's X-Men and all the others, it was great when a couple of years ago they had the big event, and Wanda, the Scarlet Witch, declares, no more mutants. Okay, no more mutants, just 485 mutants. And I'm like, too many mutants. Too many X-Men. I don't know who these people are, and I don't care. And I sometimes feel that way. And that also, I think, gives us an idea, too, of what you're going to focus on, where I'm assuming you're kind of focusing on that core group of the original 5, in addition to Len Wein and the new X-Men that came after the Neil Adams run, when they started making original X-Men comics again. So how far into the history are you going into with this? I don't want to tip your hand if you don't want to say, but I'll ask the question anyway.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's my experience with X-Men covers about 280 issues. Pretty much when Chris Claremont leaves, I leave. Like I stayed around for a while, but that Fabian Nicieze stuff and Scott Lobdell, that was, for me, that was like the methadone stage to like wean me off, man, because I'm like, this, I just wasn't feeling it, but through just inertia and, the art was always good. I liked when John Romita Jr. came back. I liked Joe Madureira a lot.
Sure.
So I'll stick around for those guys, but they're essentially unreadable to me.
I hear you, man.
So it'll cover about those issues, but it's not going to be clean. Some stuff's going to get cut out. I might include Bishop. I have a way to include Bishop in a way that he's introduced in like 281 or something like that.
Okay.
So it's not going to be that clean, but I do promise that unlike every other serialized comic in existence, this story will have a beginning, middle, and end. Will stand alone. It'll be held up on its own, and it basically trims a lot of fat. I'm taking 8,000 pages of stuff and turning it into a 240-page graphic novel, basically.
Cool. That's great, man. No, I'm really excited for this project, and I haven't even seen your cover for the magazine version. The first issue of Grand Design, because all they gave me was the guts, the 40 pages of the story itself. So I'm really excited to see what you do, both on the newsstand and then also when the first trade pops out. The trade will come out in March. Possibly, or do you know when it's coming out?
I think it's scheduled for April 4th.
Oh, April. Okay, very cool.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, so issue one comes out on the 20th of December, and then I think it's just 2 weeks later when issue 2 comes out, and then a couple months to breathe, and then the trade will be out.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, and then sometime in 2018. The next wave will be out. Yeah.
Cool, man. No, this is great. Truly, I remember when Busick and Alex Ross were doing Marvels, 20 plus years ago, and it was the same kind of excitement in terms of a reexamination of the Marvel history presented in a different way. And Hip Hop Family True was such a revelation for me, and also again, much like the X-Men. I appreciated hip-hop and certainly some of the early stuff. I had no idea of the history until I really started reading your volumes and stuff, and it's been such a great journey learning more. Even after reading your stuff, when I saw – what did you think of the HBO one-season series Vinyl and how they
I never saw it.
Okay, because they kind of touched on that those beginning years, and even went a little earlier than what I thought was the real story. And I had to talk to New Yorkers because I'm like, shouldn't this stuff be happening in like 1975, and this thing is set in 1973? And again, kind of in that way, and I don't know how it was in Pittsburgh and stuff, but like maybe Chicago was just kind of behind the curve of New York's, music scene and LA's music scene, where maybe it took a year or two for hip hop to kind of come to us when it was already happening quietly, at house parties and on the streets and stuff as it was in New York. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, it was literally that. That thing hip hop had room to breathe for a little while before they started playing down. The game changers when they started playing shows and art galleries in Manhattan where, scared white people didn't have to go up to the Bronx to discover it. They could just do it right there in the middle of money making Manhattan. And plenty of writers and media people were around. So that's when you get, the 2020 video piece about hip hop, and it started to spread from that. So of course it existed for a while before it started to spread its tentacles around the country and the world. That was actually what inspired me to make the comic. Just like, let me see what are all the component pieces involved to kind of spread the word about this culture from this very small place on the outskirts of New York, and how did this spread around the country and the world in such a vast, dramatic way.
So where have you left things? Because forgive me, I didn't read Volume 4 yet. Where are you in the hip hop chronology right now with your history of hip hop?
About 1985, pretty watershed year.
Yeah.
Like in the fourth volume, I think I cover no less than 4 or maybe 5 feature films about hip hop and rap music and break dance.
Tell me the movies
from that era. So,
because obviously I was aware of them, but maybe not paying attention. So go ahead.
Yeah, it would be Breakin' 1 and 2.
Sure.
They came out in the same year, believe it or not.
That's insane.
It is. So Breakin' 1 and 2, Beat Street, Crush Groove, and I guess the movie Rappin' with Mario Van Peebles.
Crazy.
So made by the Breakin' people. So 5 feature films, and there might have been a documentary or 2 in that mix too. So that's a long way of saying that hip hop became way more ubiquitous once it was in movie theaters and spread out. And you know how feature film kind of has a way of legitimizing a culture, or it made these Marvel flicks made being a nerd cool.
Absolutely.
Like I see a lot of tough guys going to go check out Guardians of the Galaxy and wearing shirts with Groot on it and shit.
Yep. 100%, man. No, and you're right, because even prior to the hip hop movement, Saturday Night Live, oh my God, disco exploded with Saturday Night Live. Sadly old enough to remember that sea change from rock to disco.
That's interesting.
And
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, man, and truly, and I mean, as someone that is such a movie buff, I even like watching those crazy Frankie Avalon, Annette Funicello beach movies that are ridiculous, but in those movies, you get this incredible Dick Dale rock, segment, or Jesus, Stevie Wonder when he was still little Stevie Wonder and 14 or 15 years old, and these amazing performances from these touchtone 60s acts. So, no, you're right, man. Those Alan Freed movies from the 50s that, again, when you look at the actual drama that's going on, it's atrocious, but here's the Platters, here's Chuck Berry, The Girl Can't Help It, a great 50s movie that opens with Little Richard singing his ass off in CinemaScope and in Technicolor and stuff. So yeah, it's great. So yeah, I couldn't get past, Shabba-Doo, in Breaking and Breaking 2. So shame on me, man. I should have been paying more attention to the music and stuff. So, and you're right. I think these Marvel movies represent the same kind of cultural shift. No question.
I think about just on Thanksgiving Day, I spent a good portion of the day over at my folks' place, just hanging out. And, we were in our turkey coma, and I told my pops that there's a new Netflix Punisher show, and we sat there for 3 hours watching a couple episodes.
That's great.
And then it got me thinking about reflecting on about 25 years ago when he and I were doing the same thing with the Dolph Lundgren Punisher flick, and that was all we had back then. We had, which, by the way, I actually liked the aesthetics of Dolph Lundgren as Punisher a whole lot. When I think of Punisher, I think of him, even though this new guy is really good.
Sure.
But it's we had that. We had Captain America with the rubber ears.
Red Brown. Are you thinking of the Matt Salinger movie from the early 90s?
Yeah, the early 90s.
Okay, that's Matt Salinger, sure.
And then on the Sci-Fi Channel on Easter, they would have the Mighty Marvel the Mighty Marvel Marathon or something, and I would just get 3 Memorex tapes and put them on EP, the 7-hour recording speed, and record the old Doctor Strange movie and that really crappy Spider-Man 70s show and every single episode of the Lou Ferrigno plus the 2 movies with Thor and Daredevil.
Yes.
That's all we had, and I just saw, did you see the flick called the documentary called Doomed?
Yes.
About the Roger Corman Fantastic Four?
Yes, I have. It was fantastic.
When I was a little dude, I rented Carnosaur 2 or 3 over and over again because the trailer was at the beginning of that. I've never to this day, I can never tell you what happened in Carnosaur 2. But I just watched that trailer over and over again, man. So it's I've been waiting for this era to come. And here we are,
Absolutely, man. No, and I again, old enough to have seen those 70s Marvel movies when they were first on TV when I was a little kid. And you're right. I mean, that's why even those ridiculous superhero roasts that they did with the DC heroes, we were all over that shit because it's Adam West and Burt Ward, 10 or 15 years after Batman 66, so of course we're excited. It's fucking Batman and Robin, and Jesus, there's Hawkman with legitimately decent-looking wings, and, I got to meet Charlie Callis, the comedian, who played Sinestro on those cheeseball specials, and I'm like, dude, I gotta tell you, you are Sinestro, and his eyes got wide. They naturally would get wide, because that was part of his act, because he was a bug-eyed comedian, but he's like, okay, I can check that off the list. He goes, every city I play, there's at least 1 or 2 of you that remember that one knockoff throwaway special I did and can't help but tell me how much I really look like Sinestro. And I'm like, oh, yeah, man. I mean, it's like Gil Kane was had you sit down and helped design the character based on your looks. It was insane. So, yeah, man, that's what we had. I mean, now I sound like Dana Carvey used to on SNL when he was the old man. That's what we had, and we loved it. We didn't care. We loved it.
That's that thing, man. Every now and again, and it was sort of my excuse for why I saw Star Wars Episode 1 so many times. There's a famous saying that's if you can't be with the one you love the one you're with, man.
Stephen Stills, yes, sir.
So
absolutely, you're killing me, man.
That's all we had.
Well, you see, there you go, Ed. Now you've got the right sensibility about this stuff, and again, it comes through in your work, and it honors it, and but there, and I don't think you're not parroting it per se. How would you describe how you do, how you're doing these Marvel books? I mean, what would you say other than hey, it's just my style and everything? Clearly, there is love for this product, but there are little quick little jokes, and just you can't help but look at the Golden Age heroes. I love the fact that you touch upon Namor and the Human Torch and their classic battle. It's such a touchstone moment, not only fictionally in Marvel's history, but also the creative force behind that book being produced. And, the famous story of, Martin Goodman telling, Carl Burroughs and now I'm blanking on who the Human Torch artist.
Bill Everett.
Oh, yeah, Bill Everett, the Submariner, exactly. Great, guys, have that on my desk, Monday morning or whatever. And then having this massive artist jam session of, all right, we got to fucking do this book now that we promised. And it is this incredible story that still holds up. And then I love the little twist of, guess what? That's the first mutant encounter of the Marvel Universe, or at least the first documented one. So
it's the first fearful. I wanted to use that because in the history of comics, I believe that's considered to be the first kind of superhero kind of crossover in the history of comics. Yes. So it has that notch as well. And it is a pretty legendary story with Burgos and Everett kind of cranking it out in a drunken weekend or whatever. So I just wanted to include some a tangible moment that adds to this humanity's fears about mutants, because it was established way later, 50 years later or whatever, that Namor is considered a mutant. Yep. So let me build that in a little bit earlier and just give people a real reason to fear mutants beyond just, the human kind of prejudices when it comes to just physical aesthetics. Yep. or stuff like that. So, it was almost like that they built that comic for me to cherry pick and put into this X-Men story at this exact moment. And I do have kind of a knowledge of the Marvel Universe in that way. I live here in Pittsburgh and rent is cheap, which is a way of saying that the comic shops here can have almost like a football field amount of space.
Cool.
To warehouse old comics. Sure. And basically every single Marvel comic is here in town at my disposal. I don't necessarily have to buy it. The shop owners know I'm not going to steal, but they'll let me check out. They'll let me check out some 1950s Captain America comics and stuff. I am privileged in that way to have access to this stuff. So it's like, let's build some of that into the narrative. Absolutely. I wanted to create some insight into how is Charles Xavier so rich, and where did this dynastic wealth come from? Yes. So I built that, and you know what? They may have established that in later X-Men comics, but like I said, I don't know anything beyond issue 280. Whenever Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld and McFarlane, those guys went off and created Image Comics. Yeah. I was one of those little knuckleheads that went right with them.
Oh, I understand.
And sure. and Marvel was from that moment forward pretty obsolete in a lot of ways. But then the Image guys weren't putting their books out at regular enough clips for me. And then that's when I discovered more indie fare, Fantagraphics books and sure. Love and Rockets and Robert Crumb. That's the exact trajectory. And my comic book needs as a reader have been the same for the past 20 years, which is I want to see a complete vision from the mind of a single person, and it sort of stayed that way, so that's what this is. This is my X-Men comic, and there's no other influences that are directly connected with the stuff that you see on the page, the choices that you see me make. The editor is there to help copy edit my stuff and provides like a secondary brain whenever I need it. and it's a big help. But the comics that I enjoy most, they just do not come off of the assembly line.
I understand, man. No, and again, I'm glad that you found those influences. It comes through in your final product as well. And believe me, it's reassuring for me as someone that's a bit older than you that we had the same reactions to what was going on as far as mainstream books in the 90s. And I checked out, and also I was in my early 20s and, money was tough. So I just stopped reading for about 7 years or so and came back for things like Busick and Alex Ross doing Marvels and Kingdom Come. But it was in '99 when the independent guys like Bendis and Greg Rucka and Brubaker, and I lean on writers because I'm a story guy first and foremost, but again, appreciated the new art styles like from Oeming and Martin Burrow and some of these other guys. And I'm like, oh, someone's got a new take on this stuff, and it's interesting, and it's deeper, and it's gotten less surfacey. And I mean no disrespect to the Lobdels or Niciezas that carried the torches during that period as well. Just didn't speak to me. I mean, they still sold a lot of books. But, it just didn't speak to me. And, and then I started to find more independent stuff after I got back to comics, 99 on. So, I get it. And, it's beautiful, man. What you're doing right now is fantastic. And I really hope that, like we said, that the again, whether you touch these new, the Wednesday Warriors or not, I want your audience to really obviously check them out, which I'm sure they will, but also get more new readers because this is really a great way to present what was really good storytelling from Claremont and Byrne and, Paul, and now I'm blanking, Paul Smith. Yeah, Paul Smith, of course, shame on me. See, that's what I mean, man. But you're helping this latent X-Men reader catch up and fill in the blanks, like you said, too, because there is context. We really get a good look at the Xavier family in this first issue and what else was going on in the world impacted by the mutants, where it wasn't a direct impact, but because of their actions, you kind of get a real world reaction to some of these events. And that's terrific.
Right. But yeah, but it's also at every moment I try to allow the reader to know that this is a magical universe. This is a fantastical place, and it is completely not bound by the physics of our world, because the thing just implodes at that point. So, if you ever read Hitchcock Truffaut, mm-hmm. Hitchcock talks about people that he calls the plausibles, and it's like, it's like people who are like anti-fun, so like it doesn't have like, I feel the need to remind people that it's a magical universe, man, where claws pop out of a guy's hand. Another guy can shoot, concussive beams out of his eyes. Like, we are not bound by the universe as we know it, because otherwise, then Magneto is an 80-year-old guy wreaking havoc. And I don't know about you, but I'm not afraid of any 80-year-old.
Yeah, I agree. That's true.
So just take that out of the equation from the start, and keep things fun. It's all meant to be kind of enjoyable. It's I was just thinking about what you were saying about like checking out a comics in like the 90s, and I very often have these conversations with friends like, what the heck did we even buy in the 90s? Like, what were we checking out? Because I still went to the comic shop every Wednesday, but the true answer is I was definitely reading Preacher months in, months out.
Sure.
So that would be like one of the efforts of the big two. But other than that, man, it's like there was like a back section of the comic shop where there were old issues of Acme Novelty Library and 8 Ball by Dan Clowes and stuff like that. And they cost more money than your regular comics. So I think I was buying fewer comics, but I was buying like that really, really primo era Fantagraphics stuff,
I get
man. But it does come up in conversation quite often where it's like, yeah, that like, you know, were you one of the people that bought Silver Sable #1 with the chromium cover? Like, I wasn't, but there were definitely, 500,000 people who were.
It was very weird. And again, it's great that projects like this are bringing together the love that people like yourself and the Strange Tales and the Bizarro Comics people have for the classic stuff and be able to interpret it in their style, no filters, as you say. I meant to ask, who's your editor for this, if you have one?
His name's Chris. Yeah, his name's Chris Robinson.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what other books he's overseeing, but at first it was this guy Dan Ketchum who was an ex-editor.
Okay.
But now he is an EX editor for Marvel. Like, he just doesn't work there anymore. But yeah, Chris, like, we have a real good rhythm going. We've created a system, and it's a system that Marvel is very, very happy with in terms of what I provide to them each week.
Sure.
It's steady, it's rhythmic. We've been working together for a year and a half. So they know what my capabilities are. They know that they also know I'm not playing, man. Like, I'm 7 days a week on this thing, and doing everything I can to make it great. So, well, they're a big help. It's cool.
Hey, man, honestly, love the first issue. Hip Hop Family Tree fans are not going to be disappointed. I do believe that X-Men fans will really enjoy your take as well. And as you said, let's hope that this really is a first step forward for innovation again at Marvel. This is what happened when Joe Quesada took over and brought in a lot of fresh people and fresh ideas. And we got a hell of a lot of good comics in the early 2000s. And, sometimes things, you need a shake-up sometimes to kind of regain your footing and remember that it's important to push the medium forward. And it's interesting that you're doing it with a look back at X-Men history. But it's a very cool project and deserves everyone's attention. It comes out again, as you said, December 20th is the first issue?
It is, yeah.
Excellent. Grand Design. No deception here from Ed Piskor. X-Men Grand Design. That first issue, December 20th, and second issue just a couple weeks after that. But nice going, man. Keep it up. And truly, anytime you have something new, you're welcome back to Word Balloon because I enjoy our conversations and enjoy your point of view. So thanks for sharing today.
Yeah, for sure. It is a good conversation, and I appreciate you once again taking the time to spread the word about the comic, and I will certainly take you up on that offer in the future. That was fun. Ed Piskor, you got to check out X-Men Grand Design, coming out in late December, the week before Christmas. It's really, really cool and done in a great, fresh indie style that I think longtime X-Men fans and newcomers and also just Ed Piskor fans are really going to enjoy. I love stuff like this. So it was really fun to talk to Ed about his new project in Marvel on today's Word Balloon. Word Balloon brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Again, thank you for your support. If you would like to subscribe to Word Balloon, you can go to patreon.com/wordballoon or go to wordballoon.com and click on the Patreon ad. Some of the great books that you can find at our other sponsor for today, In Stock Trades, at instocktrades.com. How about things like Injection, Trade Paperback Volume 3, my good buddy Declan Shalvey, Jordy Belair, and Warren Ellis bringing you this excellent image series. It's 45% off for Volume 3, $9.34. You can get Amazing Spider-Man, Renew Your Vows. Man, that's a great book. Ryan Stegman and Jerry Conway. This trade is 45% off, $10.99. A great what-if almost story without the what-if title about the married Peter and Mary Jane and their daughter May, who's kind of discovering her powers. It's very different from Spider-Girl. I think you'll enjoy it. Also, there's Daredevil Back in Black, Charles Soule, kicking ass. This is 45% off, $10.99. And how about, I don't know, do you collect the Star Wars movie adaptations? The Rogue One adaptation is available now.
Marvel's doing a great job. I always sound like I'm like up Marvel's ass. I really am not. I like good products, and I've mentioned some DC products, obviously, and some Image products as well. But I really do think, and I think the sales are bearing this to be true. Marvel's doing a great job with the Star Wars license. It's in incredible hands. We're getting great art. We're getting amazing stories and good adaptations as well. So if you're interested in, if you've got all the other Star Wars movies, you got to put Rogue One on the shelf as well. The trade paperback is 45% off and $10.99 at InStockTrades.com. Again, your orders are $50 or more, free shipping. So check it out. Great time to do it this holiday season. A great way to add to your gift list and maybe cross off some people with some great books at great prices. InStockTrades.com. Thanks for listening to Word Balloon today. We're closing out November with this episode. More great stuff already lined up for December. As I always say, new people and returning fun with returning guests. And I hope you'll be around to enjoy it throughout the holiday season and the other months ahead. Thank you very much for the support of Word Balloon. Thank you for listening to the show. Can't wait to talk to you in the next couple days. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2017.